What's Your Number? A short story by Lynette Sloan. I turned over in bed and reached for my alarm clock. I'd always hated Monday mornings, but at least the barrister who served inside the coffee shop had a lovely smile, and she always seemed eager to serve me. Her name badge said Kelly. I smiled to myself. I would ask her out the next time I saw her. My job at Charles and Bailey Architects in Wigan was a huge step up from my earlier role as an office junior in a solicitor's office. The chores there had been belittling for a man in his early 20s. I had answered phones, made coffee, manned the counter, and photocopied documents for the partners and their secretaries. The university course and a lot of hard work had paid off, and now, 7 years later, my wage was many times what it had been. I would soon have enough money saved for a down payment on a flat. I glanced in the mirror and brushed my dark wavy hair. I smiled. My good looks had gotten me plenty of dates, but after a few weeks, each new girlfriend would ask to see my place, and their interest in me would fade when they learned I still lived with my mother. The prospective flat would solve that problem. Mum called up the stairway. "Terry, you're going to be late." I rushed down the stairs and grabbed my briefcase off the side table, ready to leave. "Wait up," she called after me as I reached for the front door handle. "I've made you some sandwiches and a flask of tea." I'd have preferred a cappuccino with a vanilla shot and extra cream from the coffee shop, but didn't want to offend her. Mum and I had been through a lot since Dad passed, and it was she who had encouraged me to qualify as an architect to get a better paid job. I turned as she met me in the hall and took the flask and sandwich box from her. I frowned. "Mum, what's that number on your chest?" She looked down. "Where? I don't see anything." I nodded towards it. "There. Grey numbers, about 4 centimetres high, quite faded." Mum grinned. "Don't be daft. I'll see you tonight." On the way to the office, I stopped for petrol. I'd have filled up over the weekend, but kept procrastinating. Another customer had a faded grey number written across his T-shirt, 67433. Was this a new fashion? I would usually have paid by card at the pump, but fancied a chocolate bar, so I filled my tank and stepped inside the station. The middle-aged woman serving on the till had the same numbering across her chest, but it was more defined. "Is that a new fashion?" I asked, nodding towards her blouse. "No, I have to wear this. Not very flattering, I know." "I meant the number." The woman looked down and frowned. "There's no number on my uniform." I drove into town and parked in the car park at the far end of Duke Street. Everyone I passed on the way to the office had a different number on their chest. 5705, 3925, 567. I paused in front of the Edwardian building which housed my workplace. A woman called to me from across the road. "Don't stand there too long. The eaves may fall on you." I noted she had a much lower number on her chest, 120. Feeling uneasy, I loosened my tie and collar. The smell of old wood and musky files hit me as I stepped inside the building. I was used to this now, and every time I smelled musty books, it took me right back to the office. I strode through reception, wondering if the large aquamarine print wallpaper was as old as the antique polished counter and Mr. Chives, our senior accountant. A living cliché, Mr. Chives grunted a good morning as he shuffled past me, his back arched with age, a gnarled hand on his carved wooden walking stick. The inadequate lighting in the room didn't allow me to see if he had a number. The door on my right led into my office. To hide the musky smell, which now seemed to permeate my clothing and every pore in my body, At my request, the office junior had lit a scented candle on my desk half an hour before I arrived. This helped a little, but the smell of cookie dough made me feel hungry. I sat in my office chair and performed a search on my computer for anything I could find on chest numbers. My secretary opened the door and walked in before I could find anything. "This is from the new client," she said, handing me a yellow file. "Mr. Charles said you're to look it over, acquaint yourself with the blueprints, etc., then buzz him on the intercom. He wants to speak with you." I tried not to stare at the number on her chest, 4751. She narrowed her eyes. "Really? I wouldn't have pinned you as the office perv." I knew by now that no one else could see the numbers, so I cleared my throat and apologised. Having glanced at the diagrams and speed read the file contents, I lifted the old-fashioned intercom receiver and pressed number 9, the number for Mr. Charles' office. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across the desk from him, trying not to stare at his number, -6751. The number, printed on a red background, appeared negative, like a deficit account. He was saying, "You'll be a good fit here. You've only been with us 6 months, but I see a lot of me in you." He leaned forward and placed his hands on his leather-topped desk. "You're just what Clive Jackson is looking for." I hoped that was a good thing. He continued, "You'll meet him at noon in the Dog and Bone Tavern, the one on Lewis Avenue. Do you know it?" I smiled. "I'll find it." "Highly irregular, I know, but that's Jackson for you. He knew my father, the founder of this company, so make a good impression on him, lad." Lewis Avenue was only a few streets away. The rain had stopped, so I cut through the park. This route took me straight to the south end of Lewis Avenue. I didn't know of the Dog and Bone and walked the length of the road a few times before I spotted a small side road. This was strange. I'd walked this way before, but had never noticed the narrow road. The pub appeared quaint and inviting. In better weather, the paved area could have held tables and chairs for pub patrons, but the staff hadn't put them out today because of the earlier downpour. The 2-storey public house appeared even older than my office building. The worn limestone entrance step must have welcomed many thousands of customers over the years. I noted that the red, green and cream floor tiles inside the tavern showed wear, particularly the ones in front of the bar next to the polished brass footrest. Dark carved wood panelling lined 3 of the 4 walls, adding to the ambience and the feeling of having stepped into a time capsule. As I approached the bar, the landlord flicked on a wall switch and 2 brass lamps lit up, one set on each side of the polished wooden counter. "That's better," he said. "Looks like that storm's coming back. It's getting dark in here." Not wanting to appear a heavy drinker who wouldn't give his full attention to his work, I bought a half pint of lager and a packet of crisps, then sat at the table nearest the leaded windows where I could take advantage of the daylight when the storm had passed. It was still bewildering seeing numbers printed across everyone's chest, and I wondered if they had a purpose. If so, what did they signify? Was it better to have a high number or a low one? I glanced down at my shirt. I didn't have a number. Was this good or bad? The 2 old men sitting in the far corner had red minus numbers, yet the barman had a much longer number. This was only a little lower than the one I'd noticed on a nun's habit on my way here. I ate the crisps and took a few swigs of lager. In the corner of the room, the grandfather clock struck 2 o'clock. Mr. Jackson was late. I took out the file containing the plans for the new office building and looked through the several pages of architectural drawings, a page of design specifications, a site plan, floor plan, and a cross-section of the main building. I wasn't sure the company would get planning permission for such a pretentious and modern-looking structure. There was nothing like it in the borough. Around half an hour later, I decided Mr. Jackson had gotten lost, so I placed the documents back in the file and stood up to leave. My eyes widened when I spotted an elderly gentleman sitting in the chair opposite me. I hadn't seen him arrive. He must have the stealth of a leopard. The man wore a tweed suit and had a good head of white trimmed hair, but there was no number on his chest. He smiled and held out his hand. "Clive Jackson, Jackson Enterprises. You can call me Clive." "Sorry," I said, shaking his hand. "I didn't notice you arriving." "I've been looking forward to meeting you." He lost the smile and adopted a serious expression. "I've watched your career from afar. So glad you took that university course. It shows persistence, even if you found the subject less interesting than you hoped you would." "I enjoyed parts of it." I bit my lip. "Your preliminary plans are interesting and very detailed. Maybe you could go over your requirements with me, and I'll share some of my ideas." Clive leaned an arm on his chair and frowned. "Charles told you to make a good impression. Can't have me thinking you're not happy in your job and excited to work on the project." I wasn't sure what to say. Mum often said I had a habit of saying the wrong thing and it was better to keep quiet. Your mother's right. I parted my lips a little and shifted in my chair. "Mother? About what?" "You were just remembering how your mother always says it's better to say nothing than to open your mouth and appear a fool." "You know my mother?" I sat back and studied the old man. How did he know what I was thinking? Clive shrugged. "Let's get down to the matter at hand." I opened the envelope file and selected the plans, but Clive placed his hand on my arm. "No, lad, this isn't the place to conduct business. I have an office upstairs. Would you mind accompanying me up there? You can bring your drink." I decided it would be more professional to leave the drink on the table. Clive led me through the bar, nodding at the barman as we walked past him. The air was clearer in the hall and didn't smell of smoke and beer. The older man stopped walking when we drew level with a wooden lift door. He pressed the call lift button and the door opened. "I'm surprised the building needs a lift," I said. "There are only 2 floors." We stepped inside and the door closed. I expected a rickety ride in an old lift like this, but its smooth ascent surprised me. The lift jolted a little, then increased speed. I gripped the brass handrail. The flashes of light coming through the small lift door suggested we had already ascended several floors, yet the lift was still increasing speed. I tightened my grip on the handrail until my knuckles were white, and I took a deep breath, all the while concentrating on keeping my beer and crisps in my stomach. "I don't understand. There are only 2 floors." The lift slowed down and stopped. "We're here." Clive turned to face me. "Before I open the door, take a few deep breaths and calm yourselves. What you will see will be surprising, but there's no need to worry. You can return to the pub any time you wish. Just give me a fair hearing first." I nodded. Clive spoke with authority. "Open." And the doors opened, revealing a bright room measuring around 80 feet square. White desks stood in rows, staffed by a workforce of what could easily have been 50 people of various ages and several nationalities. Interspersed between the desks, large foliage pot plants stood on the tiled floor, reaching several feet above our heads. Clive noticed me looking around. "The plants break up the monotony of the room, don't you think?" I nodded again, still taking my mother's advice. Clive continued. "It wasn't my idea to have grey floor tiles and white walls, but I'm not in charge of construction or design. That's why you're here." Several people looked up from their computer screens and smiled at us as we passed their workstations. Clive nodded a hello to them and led me into his office. This smaller room was decorated in the same manner as the first room, with the obligatory large pot plants standing in the corner. A wall-to-ceiling window at the far end of the room gave a view of the earth from at least 5 miles high. I opened and shut my mouth a few times. Clive nodded towards a chair. "Have a seat before you fall over. The turbo lift can make you a little disorientated if you're not used to it." "That'll be it," I replied. "It wouldn't be the shock of viewing the world from the stratosphere." Clive grinned. "We're not quite that high here. The station you would design would be, though. No building can be this high." Clive took the file envelope out of my hand and set out the plans on his desk. "We're not in a building. We left the building several minutes ago. We're in low orbit." I remembered the numbers I'd seen written on people's chests. "Before we get to the design plans," I shook my head. It's been a crazy day. I'm not sure if this is related. The numbers?" "Ah, yes, the numbers. They usually ask about those before we get in the lift." I frowned. "They? Who's they?" "Our prospective employees. We contacted you through your employer, but we contact most people through the internet. Or they dial the number on the bartender's shirt." "Oh," I bit my lip. This was a phone number. I hadn't thought of that. I said, "So all your employees can see the numbers?" Clive nodded. I took a deep breath. What is their significance, the numbers? Some are high, others lower, and my boss and 2 men in the pub, they had negative numbers. "You will have noticed it has nothing to do with race, how educated or how rich or poor a person is." I got that much. "What do they signify, and who decides on a person's particular number?" Clive smiled. "The world values people by their contribution to society. For instance, to some a road digger might be considered of a less value than a brain surgeon, which is wrong, by the way. A person of great wealth might have a high social standing, whereas a homeless person would not. Again, wrong. So how do you measure a person's worth, if that's what it's about?" "At Jackson Enterprises, we measure the goodness of the heart. We see poor and rich alike. Both have good or bad intentions. So too with educated and less educated people, those of a worldly higher class, or those who are young or old. And a person's number can rise and fall during their lifetime." "I understand. If someone does something bad, they will have a low or even a negative number." "Not quite right," Clive stood. "If someone does something bad, it doesn't make them a bad person. A hungry person might steal an apple, but still have a good heart." "No one else can see the numbers, so what's the purpose of all this?" "In the short term, it's about recruiting the right people to the company." He paused. "Long term, we are looking to colonize other planets with the right people." "I see your doubt in expression. Look out the window. You didn't think you'd be sitting in an office 5 miles above an American city, did you? I mean, that's impossible." I walked across the room and looked down on the earth. "So who judges the intentions of the heart?" Clive stepped towards the door and paused with his hands on the door handle. "We have a team of workers and specialist technology that can read motives." He opened the door and spoke to a woman in the large room. "Clara, can you step into my office?" She did so, and my mouth dropped open. "Mom?" My mother bit her lip. "How do you think I paid the bills and supported you through university after your father died?" "Oh, and it was you who convinced me to become an architect." She glanced at Clive and back to me. "Well, I knew we'd need several, and I didn't want to leave you behind. They chose me as one of the first colonists. I'd like you to be a part of my team." This was the chance of a lifetime, so I quickly agreed to work for Jackson Enterprises. But I had one more question. I glanced down at my chest and looked back at Clive. "What's my number? I can't see it." "You never will," he told me. "To find out your number, you must examine the motives of your heart."